Class President, Chapter 2. Lucas for President. When the students were dismissed at 3 o'clock, Julio walked partway home with Lucas. Cricket wants to run for class president, Julio said. She also wants to run for president of the United States, Lucas said. Both boys laughed. Cricket had told everyone that she wanted to be the first woman president. She'd been talking about it since 3rd grade. Julio wished that Lucas would say, Julio, you would make a great president, but Lucas didn't say anything. Finally, Julio said, I think you should run. Me? I don't want to be president of the United States, said Lucas. I want to be the baseball commissioner. Then I could go to all the games for free. I don't mean president of the United States, said Julio. I meant you should run against Cricket. You'd make a good president for our class. Lucas shrugged. I'll help you campaign, Julio promised. I'll tell everyone to vote for you. I'll think about it, said Lucas. Great, said Julio. Excuse me. If he couldn't be class president himself, he would rather have his best friend elected instead of Cricket. They came to the street where they each went in a different direction. When Julio got home, he could hear the television even before he opened the door. His grandmother was a little deaf, and she always turned the volume way up when she was watching a soap opera. Julio greeted her in Spanish. He only knew a little Spanish, although he could understand the language when his mother and grandmother spoke together. Now his grandmother gestured for him to be quiet. Something important was happening on the screen. A man was kissing a woman and whispering something in her ear. Gross. For homework, Mr. Flores had told everyone to bring in magazines and mail-order catalogs. Then you can plan how you were going to spend your $1 million, he had said. Julio's mother didn't get any mail-order catalogs, but he could always take magazines to school. His mother was the head chambermaid at the Sycamore Shade Motor Inn. If she found something discarded in a room she was cleaning, she was always permitted to take it home. Mrs. Sanchez was always bringing home magazines and half-empty boxes of candy and fruit. Julio's grandmother couldn't read English, but she liked to look at the pictures in the magazine. Julio rarely looked at the magazines himself, except when his grandmother called his attention to a picture of a fancy house or an elegant bedroom that looked fit only for a princess or for a movie star. That afternoon, Julio looked through a stack of magazines. There were advertisements for the latest models of several cars. With his pretend $1 million, Julio decided he would buy one for his mother. It was true that she didn't know how to drive, but Ramon could teach her. He would buy Ramon a new car, too. Ramon's car was so old that it ran some days and some days it didn't. Then he decided that he should buy Nelson a car, too. Julio liked to be fair. When Nelson came in from high school, Julio was still turning the glossy pages. I get to spend $1 million in arithmetic, Julio told his brother. Come off it, said Nelson. It's just for arithmetic, Julio explained. We've got a new teacher, Mr. Flores, and he told us to make a list of all the things we want to buy and add up the prices. I'm going to buy a car for you. What color do you want? Nelson laughed. Wait till I tell the guys in my driver's ed class about that. Well, I would if I had a real $1 million, said Julio. Thanks, Nelson said. If I had $1 million, I'd buy you one too, even though you wouldn't be allowed to drive it until you were 16. He thought for a moment. Spending fake money isn't what I did in 5th grade, he said. Aren't you going to do any fractions? 5th grade is supposed to be fractions. Julio shrugged. Maybe we'll do fractions next, he said. He hoped Mr. Flores knew what he was doing. Maybe he was so new at teaching that he was going to teach them all the wrong things. At supper, Mrs. Sanchez wanted to know all about Julio's first day at school. I have a new teacher, he said. His name is Ernesto Flores. You see, Mrs. Sanchez said, turning to Ramon, you could be a teacher too. We'll see, Mom, Ramon said. This is just my first semester of college. I'm not sure what I want to study yet. Julio knew his mother was very proud that Ramon was taking classes at a junior college. She always made sure her sons did their homework and studied for exams. We're going to have a class election, Julio says. Cricket wants to be class president. I think Lucas should run against her. Maybe you should run for class president, said Mrs. Sanchez. I wouldn't be any good as president, Julio said. Lucas is really smart. He'd be great. You're smart too, said Mrs. Sanchez. You should have more confidence in yourself. You're just saying that because you're my mother, said Julio. He sat digesting chicken. and digesting his mother's words too. He wished he had the nerve to run for class president. Anyway, I already told Lucas I would help him run. Tell me you changed your mind, said Mrs. Sanchez. He's my friend, Julio protested. I can't change my mind because I told him I'd help him. If he's your friend, he'll understand, said Julio's mother. Julio wished he had never mentioned the class election. In his heart, he knew he liked the idea of being president of his class. He wished he had the courage to run. I bet no one would even vote for me, he said. How can you know if you don't try? Asked Julio's grandmother in Spanish. It was funny, Julio thought. Sometimes when they were speaking English, he was sure his grandmother didn't even know what they were talking about. Tonight, he saw that she did understand. Mama's right, said Ramon. What have you got to lose? Just the election, joked Nelson. Maybe he won't lose. Maybe he'll win, said Ramon. When you are elected president, I'll cook a special dinner to celebrate, said Mrs. Sanchez. She seemed to think the matter was all settled. All her son had to do was run, and he would get elected. His mother looked so excited that Julio was sorry he was going to disappoint her. She didn't seem to realize that it wasn't so easy to become class president. She had never met Cricket or most of his other classmates. They'd never vote for him. They'd probably fall over laughing at the thought of it. Tomorrow, he'd start campaigning for Lucas Cox.